Here we go. Germinal. Germinal. Germinal? Germinal. Emil Zola. Last year, for the first time, I read Zola. I read The Masterpiece. And The Masterpiece is one novel of 20 that comprises this monstrously enormous collection known as the Rougon Macquart series. 20 novels. And this is also one of them. Which one is it? I believe this is the 14th or the 13th in the series. And it's one of the most highly regarded. I feel a bit bad because I'm cherry picking the best ones from the series first, but 20 novels. That's going to take me some time to get to reading the entire series. Hopefully one day, if I live long enough and I retain my wits, I'll be able to sit down and read the entire series from book 1 to book 20 as one giant spectrum of French society. That would, God, what a beautiful goal that is to have in my life. So, while I was reading this book last week, I was thinking to myself, how can I make a video encouraging people to read a novel that's over 500 pages, published in 1885, about the devastating plight of French coal miners in northern France? How can I get you to read this book? I guess I can just tell you that I loved it. Yes, it's a little bit daunting when you pick up a 500-page novel. It's weighty. You can feel it. You can feel the weight of the pages in your hand, and the pages seem to turn very slowly. This is the old style of writing a novel. It is luxurious in its descriptions, quite different from the modern style of writing a novel where it's very succinct, it's very direct, it's very fast. But this was before that. This was give it all to them in all of its luxurious grandeur. Even when it's describing the absolute squalid filth of poverty, which is mainly what this novel is concerned with. So let me give you the simple plot of Germinal. There is a man. His name is Etienne. He's a bit of a hobo. We meet him when he's walking. He was fired from his previous job because he punched his manager. He's that kind of a guy. And so he's walking and he's starving and he's wondering, is this how I end my life? Just starving on the side of the road like a hobo. He sees off in the distance there is a community. He goes towards it, hoping that someone will be able to give him work. And when he gets there, he says, well, what is this place? And they tell him, this is a coal mine. He says, well, can I get a job here? I need money desperately. And they tell him no, but then he does manage to get a job in the coal mine. The first time he goes down in the mine, it is such a perfect description of hell on earth. Like the fear, the darkness, the cold, the depth. I think the first mine that he goes down into is 550 meters below the surface of the earth in this cage. I guess we can call it an elevator or a lift, but it's basically a cage suspended by these cables dropping into the bowels of the earth in the pitch blackness. If you're claustrophobic, if you're a bit afraid of the darkness, maybe it's a bit immature, but I think it's a natural human condition that we are a little bit more anxious in the darkness than we are in the light of day. There was only one thing he did see clearly. The pit gulped down men in mouthfuls of 20 or 30, and so easily that it did not seem to notice them going down. The descent to work began at 4. The men came from the locker room barefoot and lamp in hand and stood about in little groups until there were enough of them. Like some nocturnal beast, the cage, with its 4 decks, each containing 2 tubs. Without a sound, the cage would make its first little jump, and then it would drop like a stone, leaving nothing behind but the vibrating cable. Is it deep? Etienne asked a miner who was standing by, looking half asleep. 554 meters. But there are 4 levels before the bottom, and the first one is 320. They silently watched the cable, which was now coming up again. Etienne spoke first. Supposing it breaks? Oh well, it just breaks. The cage had come up again, with its easy, tireless movement. He crouched inside with his mates, and down it went again, to reappear less than 4 minutes later and swallow another lot of men. And so the shaft went on with its meal for half an hour, gulping men down more or less greedily according to the depth of the level they were bound for. But it never stopped, for the hunger of this gigantic maw could swallow up a whole people. More and more loads went down into the pitch blackness, and up came the cage out of the void, always asking for more. Etienne goes down into the mine. He's never been a miner, and all of the other miners sort of hate him because they know that he's inexperienced and they know that they're going to have to explain everything to him. They know that he's going to do a bad job. And these miners are getting paid to deliver tubs, barrels of coal to the surface. The more they can produce in a day, they will get paid more. They're not paid by the hour, they're paid by the accumulated coal that they send to the surface. And they know that this person they've been hindered with, because the previous person died, they do die quite a lot down in the mine. They know that he's going to slow down the process, and they won't get as much money today because they've got to work with this guy. So he's down there, and everything is painful, dark, wet. There's water seeping in. There's the smell of gas is making him feel lightheaded. They are almost constantly hungry. They're sweaty, and all the coal dust in the air is mingling with the sweat, which forms a black layer of cake on all of their exposed skin. And all of the men they take off their clothes because it's, hard work, it's hot, and it's perfectly hellish. One of the reasons why Zola is such a master literary figure is because just when you feel that it can't get any worse, suddenly he introduces the horses who live in the mine because they are needed to carry these barrels of coal from one end to another. These coal barrels are just too heavy for humans to transport. So there is a stable down in the mines with, I think, a dozen horses who live there in the darkness. And to really hammer home the awfulness of this miner's existence, he describes a scene where a new young horse is being brought down into the mine, paralyzed with fear, to be brought into this hell hole. It brought out so much sympathy. Like how awful it is for a horse, this wild, huge creature that is sort of the embodiment of freedom, to be sent down into a mine to become a worker. And so suddenly when I was feeling so sorry for this horse, again, it turned over in my mind. I said, well, what about the people? That's a horse, that's an animal. But what about the human beings? Like, what about their mentality and their emotional state? What does it do to these people? There's the fear of going down in the mines, and just suddenly when you're thinking, okay, all right, like maybe Etienne is going to be a good miner, like maybe he'll pick up the skills really quickly, and then we see this horse, this wild creature going down into the vision of hell that human beings have created for themselves, for the sake of industry, the Industrial Revolution. I think, oh God, how tragic is that, to send these animals down, to spend the next 10 years of their lives working underground, and then to realize, well, what about the people? What about the human beings who have the ability to contemplate and reflect on their lives? What does that do to the human soul? Every day to wake up at, I think, 3 a.m., to quickly gulp down some bread with margarine, to go off to the mine. Then they get to the mine floor, and then they still have to walk a kilometer from there to the coal seam where they are, chipping out the coal. A kilometer underground, and it's just the perfect vision of hell. The plight of these miners who, the companies are trying desperately to chip away at how much money they have to pay these people for the hardest work on earth. There is a very big problem, is that the miners are being paid to produce these barrels of coal, and that's how much they get at the end of the day. One of the jobs that doesn't produce coal is they have to build these frames, to keep the mine from collapsing. They have to build these frames, they call it timbering, to keep the mine wall from collapsing in on itself. And that job doesn't produce any coal, so that the miners feel that this job, even though it's critical to their safety and survival, they have to do this, but it's stealing money out of their pocket. And so they're asking for more money per barrel to compensate for the time lost due to the timbering, because the manager keeps coming down to the mine to make sure that they are doing a safe job with the timbering to make sure that it's not a poor job or that it's not on the point of collapse, or that they've made it very sturdy and safe so that the mine can keep operating. The critical thing in this book is that the miners decide that they're going to go on strike. And that is the drama in this novel, and it is some of the best drama you're ever going to read. With a big book, a 500-page book, I always try to make an effort to read 50 pages a day, because that way I get a really big piece of the novel all at once. Even a very big novel I can finish in 10 days, less than 2 weeks. Good for me. I read 150 pages in one single day because I didn't want to stop reading. I got up from the bed, I made something to eat, I made another little pot of tea, I moved to the sofa, I read more over there, I went back to the bed. Eventually, when I stopped reading on that one single day, I realized that 150 pages, because it was too good to stop. Like, this novel is so incredibly exciting. I cannot communicate to you how exciting this book is. I know it's hard for modern readers to go back to 150 years ago and to try to, to get into the mindset, not only the mindset of what the world looked like in those days, but also the way that novelists wrote their novels back in those days, because it is a more verbose, colorful style of writing. But some do it better than others, because I think Zola does it perfectly. I was never annoyed at the color, because he never goes overboard. Like, there is a scene where the managers of the mine, they are having this dinner and they are discussing about, the miners, they want more money, but you can't give more money to the miners because they'll just drink it and then they won't come to work the next day. Patting themselves on the back at how they keep the miners working in poverty so that the children they have will also be mine workers, and those children will also go into the mine because they pay them so little money that they'll never be able to escape from the mine. While they're having this discussion, they're also having this lavish meal, and the servants keep bringing in these, I don't really recognize any of the food, but I just know that it's some really high-class stuff. You know it is when they're talking about some, special trout that's cooked in a special sauce, and some pheasant that was just shot that morning and prepared in a certain particular way. Just certain words that give it away, that that the food that they're eating is really fine eating while they're talking about keeping the miners in poverty. And that is a perfect scene. It never gets melodramatic. It never gets overly done. It seems to strike the right balance between the reality and the irony of the situation. These wealthy nabobs dining like princes and, the aristocracy, while having this discussion about keeping these miners in poverty so as to ensure that they will grow up impoverished, suffering, always desperate, and those children of those children will also, they will just have this unlimited supply of miners to work and die in the mines. It's a tragedy, but that scene really struck me as, well, the rich versus the poor, industry versus the worker. So Etienne, the main character, becomes the leader of the strike, and he is the one who organizes the strike against the company. That's basically it. He goes into the mine, he works there for several months, like 6-8 months, and the strike happens, and from there, it gets amazing. Characters die. And almost every single death in this novel took me by surprise. There were some characters who, some of the bad ones, you were hoping that they would die to get that justification, for all the evil that they've done. But the deaths came so surprisingly, just out of the blue. People were killed in this novel, and that also really shocked me in such a good way, because that's a master writer of literature. The story is rolling along. It's a long story. There's a dozen main characters in the novel that you should try to, when you're introduced to a new character, maybe have a piece of paper at hand and write down the names of the people and what their position is. So Etienne, he's the main guy. He goes to work with this particular family whose name is Mayhew. That's the father's name. The patriarch is Mayhew, and his wife is known as Mayhew de. And their daughter is named Catherine, and Etienne is flirting a little bit with Catherine because eventually they all come to be living together. They rent a half a bed to Etienne for a certain amount of money per month. He still has to sleep with their oldest son. He's only renting half of the bed, but now he's in close proximity with Catherine. And at the end of the mining shift, they all go back to the Mayhew household. They all strip off their clothes and have a bath. None of them can be shy or modest in any way. They all sleep in one room, and they all sleep not together. The parents have a bed. Some of the older siblings have a bed. Some of the younger siblings have a bed, and that's how they arrange themselves. They're poor. That is the life of poor people. They sleep together. They work together. They eat together. They bathe together. Not at the same time, but in the same water. You should make an effort to learn the names of the principal characters, especially the Mayhew family. The main character, I think, is the easiest one to identify because that's the name we're going to see most often, and that's the character whose story we're following. And the satellite characters, somewhere between a dozen and 20 extra characters, and they're all quite important. They all play a very large role in the novel, especially Etienne, but also everyone else. But as I was saying, I'm not particularly good at remembering every single character's name and the part they're playing. You get introduced to this Mayhew family, and they have 7 children. It's like, okay, so there's the 2 older brothers, there's the 2 younger children, there's the poor little girl who has a hunchback, and then there's the grandfather. And then they go to the mine and they're introduced to all of these other characters. Yeah, it's tricky to keep them all in mind. I don't think it ever caused any problem for me. I read, and I knew what was happening all the time. I got a little bit confused a couple of times because there's the manager of the mine where they are working, and there is the manager of the mine in the next community. And those 2 managers got a little bit confused in my mind. This one and that one over there. But eventually I figured it out because that mine over there really the miners went over there and they kicked the shit out of the entire mine and they just ruined it so that it wouldn't be working anymore. And the manager of that mine was ruined financially. He was like, okay, well, I guess I don't have any more money now because this mine is just not functioning anymore because of these strikers. Yeah, I knew who he was because of this situation. So do you really need to be very scrupulous about paying attention to all the characters' names and their part? I was able to do it quite easily. There's a girl, she kind of easy in her affections. She was always funny when she appeared in the story. She was, she's the one that has sex with all the boys. There was another one who, this woman is, her husband goes to the mine, and when her husband goes to the mine, her lover comes back from the mine. So her lover works the night shift, and he's a boarder. So the husband goes to the mine, the boarder comes back, and the woman is getting affections from both of them. That was quite good, because that's the next door neighbors of the Mayhew family. Please read this book. You may be resistant to it. When I was younger, I said, when I get older, I'm going to read all that old French stuff. And the funny thing is now that I am older, I love this old French stuff. It is exceptionally dramatic, and it's beautifully written and well told. I should say who the translator is. The translator of this one, translated by Leonard Tancock, and this one, Germinal, a new translation by Peter Collier. Different translations, and actually, this translation of this older edition, some of the phrases were a bit funny. Some of them were a bit well, we don't really use those phrases anymore. And I actually checked the different translations, and this translation seems much more current and modern, and suddenly there will be one of those funny expressions that are not commonly used anymore, which pulls you out of the story for a moment when you think, well, did people really say that? I wonder what the original French would be. So it's a little bit more seamless in this version here. Emil Zola was born in Paris in 1840, was brought up in Aix-en-Provence in an atmosphere of struggling poverty after the death of his father in 1847. He was educated in the College Bourbon at Aix, A-I-X. And then at the Lycée Saint-Louis in Paris, he was obliged to exist in poorly paid clerical jobs after failing his baccalaureate in 1859. But early in 1865, he decided to support himself by literature alone. When not overloaded with detail, his work has tragic grandeur. Absolutely, yes. But he is also capable of a coarse, cockney type of humor. Yes, also. L'Assommoir arguably his masterpiece, has both, I haven't read that, has both in full measure. Think the effort it would have taken. Like, they didn't have typewriters then. He wrote that by hand. And this is one of 20. Please read this. Please, you will really thank me, and you will be proud of yourself for reading a big book like this about very serious social issues, such as the way that industry exploits the work of the common unintelligent people who have to do these jobs because that's where they live and that is the only employment available to them, unless you're the shopkeeper who is hated by everyone because what's wrong with the shopkeeper? He will only give you credit if, if the wife does him special favors. You'll be surprised at the amount of sexual exploits that take place in this book. Like, there's a lot of sex happening in this book because, well, that's the only fun that these poor people have. They take advantage of it as frequently and as often as they can, even though they know it leads to babies, which also keeps them in poverty. It's the one and only joy in their life is just to get some action anytime they can. It's funny that even the church has nothing for them. Like, we're poor. What can your church do for us? It's nothing. It's a fantasy. Keep away with your stupid ideas of this man in the sky. We are poor. We're starving. Don't bring your bullshit around to us. I love Zola. I should try to read more than just one novel per year, but currently that's the best I can do. In 18 more years, when I'm 69 years of age, then I will have hopefully read the entire series of the Rougon Macquart. I feel this obligation to read the entire series from beginning to end, all in a row. How long would that take me? 20 novels? It would take me half a year to just read those one after another. But a half a year, I mean, is that really too much to ask for something that is so, magnificent? There's a word that I almost never use, but I can use it in this instance because it is just beyond the normal scope of what we ask of literature. Like, maybe, some drama, some excitement, some morbid fascination, some titillation. But this is magnificence in the novel form. They don't write novels like this anymore. Book lottery. I'll send you this one. Not this one. That was a gift from Jack. Once again, thanks, Jack. Kim. Hello, Kim. Thank you for supporting the channel. I appreciate it very much. I hope you like French literature, Kim. Kim, could you please write to me at grantlovesbooks@gmail.com, and I will send you this. And I will send you this. What number is this? Number 64. Kim, please write to me your mailing address. You get this, you get this, you get a personal letter from me. If you want to support the channel, please, down below, members on YouTube or on patreon.com, or patreon.com, Grant Loves Books. And yeah. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. I have two versions. This was actually a gift from one of my patrons on Patreon. This is from Jack. Thank you very much, Jack. Thanks so much for this. I already had this one, and I read this one because, I'll keep this one, and I'm going to keep it nice, and, I destroy my books when I read them. I'll keep this one. I'll take this with me when I eventually move to Japan. Thank you, Jack.